Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. The Monroe County Board of Commissioners met on July 17th. Health Administrator Lori Kelly gave a series of updates from the Health Department.
The emergency room visits for COVID-like illnesses have slightly increased over the last week. However, wastewater detections are still low at this time. The Health Department is now able to provide Quit for Life tobacco cessation referrals. You can call 812-349-2150 for more information. And as always, we have vaccines available through our public health clinic. You can call 812-353-3244 for an appointment.
Later, the commissioners discussed a change in personnel policy pertaining to parental and family leave for county employees. County Attorney Molly Turner King addressed the commissioners about the change.
During the June 28th meeting, we brought this policy to you for your consideration. It was approved, and then it was submitted to the prosecutor and Board of Judges for approval, and both agreed that this should be implemented. Since then, I did make two minor changes to the policy, which I provided to you via text by a handout up there. The first change is to Section F. It just adds some language that was inadvertently omitted to make the sentence read more clearly. And then the second change is to Section I, and it just is adding clarity that anytime an employee is on paid leave, their need for a release from a doctor to be reinstated to work is going to be governed by FMLA. So there are some circumstances in which a release wouldn't be needed, and so FMLA is going to govern that.
Commissioner Giffens commented on the positive impact that the change will have on both employees and themselves, the employers.
When I was telling a citizen about this, they were like, what, the county doesn't already have this in place? People were surprised, but I think this makes us much, much more competitive and as an employer, and I think it's the right thing to do, especially for, we've got county employees like Ms. Ridge, who's here, who've been with us for decades, and I think we need to acknowledge the work that our employees do. So this is one step for doing.
Commissioner Lee Jones added to Giffen's sentiment, saying, quote, "I agree with all of that. This is certainly a wonderful thing to be able to do for our employees, and I just wish we had done it a little sooner," end quote. The ordinance was approved unanimously. The Monroe County Commissioners' regularly scheduled meeting for July 24th was canceled. They will meet again on July 31st. At the Monroe County Public Library Board of Trustees meeting on July 17th, Director of Public Services Josh Wolf shared the director's monthly report on the state of the library and its programming.
Circulation Services prepared for summer reading by completing a full round of shelf reading in all collections while working on shifting projects to make space for returns and shelf displays and getting ready for the big summer reading rush. Usage of Hoopla. It seems like every month we talk about the increasing usage of Hoopla, our online platform that provides access to digital audio and ebooks as well as movies and music, increased again in June with 132 new users. The top trending title in Hoopla for MCPL in June was the ebook edition of College Girl Missing, with a lot of local importance. It bumped the audiobook of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Adult Services librarian Maggie Hutt hosted a community resource fair, which drew nearly 150 people. The program assisted community members with navigating Bloomington's social assistance programs, including childcare, health insurance, food and housing resources. Local groups participating included the Hoosier Hills Food Bank, South Central Community Action Program, and El Centro. Monroe County Youth Council held their first Summer of Service event in the ground floor study room on June 5th. Teens helped assemble cooling kits for Beacon, which contained items specifically requested by people in the community experiencing homelessness. The teens worked really well together, compiling the kits and writing notes for the recipients. Children's librarians visited schools within the MCCSC district and private schools across Monroe County to raise awareness about the summer reading program. This outreach initiative enabled us to connect with educators, libraries, and school administrators while disseminating information about the various library services, including the bookmobile. I'm very pleased to report that 2,500 children and tweens signed up for the summer reading program in June, and we are still signing people up. Anybody out there watching, the program doesn't end until July 31st. and adult and teens are doing very well too. The Cats Cruise Brave the Heat for Street Dance Rewind from the Monroe County History Center on June 29th. The Outdoor Punk Music Festival, held between Washington and Lincoln Streets, showed definitively that the history of Bloomington punk rock is still being written.
Next, the board discussed the conclusion of the COVID leave policy. Human Resources Director Becky Throckmorton spoke on the decision to end the policy.
Just wanted to thank the board for extending the paid COVID leave as long as we did. I know it was very unusual for other businesses to extend that as long as we did. And so the impact that's had on staff and the ability for us to keep COVID from becoming a bigger issue among staff and spreading has been really, really appreciated and very valued. With the end of the pandemic and the changes in the CDC guidelines, we felt like it was appropriate to suggest that we ended that policy. We've had a decrease in the number of cases that we've had, and with the current guidelines saying that COVID is treated more like a respiratory illness and is 24 hours fever-free, we felt like it was the appropriate time to end that extended policy that we had.
Board member Chris Hull asked about the COVID-19 numbers in the community and how staff decided it was a good time to terminate the policy. Throckmorton responded.
So I guess I'm wondering, even though you say it's down, and I know that in the newspaper and other places they have the combination of the 3 different RS, whatever the letters are on different things.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is this a good time to stop?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question. We have been keeping an eye on the number of cases that we've had because we do track paid COVID leave, and that has decreased significantly, especially over the last 6 months, and even kind of as we've gotten into the summer. We've seen significant decreases every time that we've renewed the policy. With the current CDC guidelines being 24 hours fever-free, our folks have access to paid sick leave, and so we felt like that was appropriate to go back to the paid sick leave. And then the next policy that we're proposing here is a test pilot program for those folks who don't have access to sick leave, to give them something essentially to replace that COVID leave that we're taking away.
Throckmorton then proceeded to explain the pilot policy proposal for contagious illness leave for 15 to 18-hour employees.
So we are proposing that this is a 6-month trial run. We kind of want to see how it works and if 25 hours is going to be the right number of hours for our folks who work 15 to 18 hours. So anyone under 20 hours currently does not have access to paid sick leave. And so this is a policy that will give them access to a bank of paid sick leave for a contagious illness. There's a little bit of an explanation about why we're doing this. I'm happy to read it to you if it's not in the packet, but I didn't want to read you a whole page of text. But basically, it's going to give them access to 25 hours of contagious illness time that they can use as they need it for anything that might be COVID or might be, flu, RSV, strep, anything like that that could potentially be passed from staff member to staff member. And they just will request it in our HRS system and be able to take that time off as paid time.
Board President Christine Harrison asked if doctor's appointments would count toward the policy. Throckmorton said that it would not, but that these employees could take unpaid leave without penalty. The board approved the pilot policy. During the July 16th meeting of the Bloomington Board of Public Works, board members heard a resolution that would give them authority to make special purchases under emergency conditions. The Public Works Board would need prior written approval of payments from the city's controller before authorizing payments. City Attorney Alex Pratt and Public Works Director Adam Wason gave an overview of the resolution.
Following the work session, we split the one resolution that we had presented then into 2, and now resolution 2442 is just a blanket approval of any pre-approved control purchases for emergency conditions.
And I'll just jump in here too to just mention that as we talked about in the work session yesterday, this will help get us in compliance. This will allow us to be in compliance with both our local purchasing policies for emergency purchases, as well as for getting and making sure we have the property authority for staff to execute emergency purchases in coordination with the mayor's office and controller.
The board approved the resolution unanimously. Next, the board approved funding for emergency storm debris cleanup. This comes after a supercell storm hit Bloomington and surrounding areas, causing mass power outages and damage. Public Works Director Adam Wason asked the board to approve 2 contracts with Williams Tree Company in Martinsville, one for $150,000 and another for $350,000 for cleanup efforts.
We had a special purchase contract in the packet yesterday for an initial contract approved through the special purchasing policy I stated earlier. That was for not to exceed up to $150,000. As we have moved through our first week of storm cleanup with our private contractor, we knew the $150 was just kind of a placeholder to get started. We're asking for a not to exceed in the amount of $500,000 at this point in time. We're about 35, 40, maybe almost 50% through on most of the parcels that we know have debris. They've really started in the heaviest hit areas, so it wasn't surprising that they had those higher costs in that first week and a half. So at this point, we're asking for a not to exceed of $500,000 on this, and we are going to also be working with updating the city council and others on these emergency purchases. I mentioned in the board work session yesterday, we will be seeking reimbursement for these costs through whether we meet a federal threshold for FEMA disaster declaration. We would be reimbursed at a higher percentage rate than if we're just at a state Department of Homeland Security disaster declaration. For those two, so depending on how much damage there has been statewide will determine if we get that FEMA level of reimbursement or that Department of Homeland Security. Difference is probably about 30 to 40%. So if it's a FEMA reimbursement, we would hopefully be at about a 75% reimbursement. If it's a state reimbursement, we'll be more likely 35 to 50%.
The board approved the resolution 2-0. On July 15th, the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission gave the green light for several projects in the Hopewell neighborhood. They allocated over $300,000 for demolition, design work, power relocation, and lighting. To begin, they heard a change order with Renaissance Incorporated for demolition services. Senior Vice President for JS Held, Deb Kuntz, walked through the resolution.
This is related to Hopewell South. This is related to the demolition project on Hopewell South. There was some under slab transit that was found as the demolition was going on in its final stages. And so that is a transite material that the contractor had to get a licensed contractor to remove. We got a good deal at $42.35 in terms of its pretty small amount, and we are asking the commission to approve this change order tonight to make sure that we can continue and close up the final pieces of the demolition project.
Board member Randy Cassidy asked whether there were any change orders left on the demolition. Kuntz replied that this would be the last change order.
In your opinion, Deb, are we complete with the change orders that be coming forward for this demolition?
Yeah, this is it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we obviously didn't expect this. This is, if you've been in through construction, you know, we find unforeseen conditions. There was environmental testing done at everything above the soil, but there wasn't any asbestos testing underneath the soil. So unforeseen condition, but this is the last change order.
If we had environmental testing done for underneath the slabs and where things were, or we just?
We did not do an under slab environmental test, didn't expect to see any, and so this one was found as they tore up the slab.
Okay, and it's been taken back to where it's a non-transite material?
That's what this will do. Yep.
Then the commission heard a resolution for approval regarding a grant for the Hopewell project. Project engineer for the city, Kendall Kanuki, introduced the resolution.
As you know, we have a $1.8 million grant a READY grant that is paying for the first phase of construction of Hopewell West. So the grant includes a budget template that kind of gives a scope of work and then estimated budget amounts. This was originally submitted when we applied for the grant, and it was approved by the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, IEDC. And as we've proceeded with design, we've come up with a few changes that needed to be made to that. So one thing that was stated originally is that we were going to complete the build out of Jackson Street 350 feet is what we said in the original application. And what ended up happening during design is we determined we really only wanted to build about 240 feet of Jackson Street because the additional 100 feet is basically constructing the intersection of the future University Street. That's all of the pavers and the park parcels and all of these things that really are kind of one complete unit from Rogers all the way to Fairview Street. And so by constructing just this little piece, we kind of have this empty section in between where we're selecting pavers, we're selecting landscaping, we're selecting potentially park amenities that when we're not really doing most of the park itself. So we felt the logical terminus was really this point here where you kind of tie into the University Greenway that will be constructed at a later time. So that was the main change in the scope of work.
Next, Kanuki delivered a resolution for an amended preliminary design contract for Hopewell West.
This ties directly into the previous resolution. This is the increase in the design contract to get those drawings from 30 to 60%, and also adds that portion of Rogers Street to the design contract. And this is a design contract with Crossroad Engineers.
Senior Project Manager for the city's engineering department, Roy Ayton, provided background on power relocation with Duke Energy for Hopewell West.
So this is part of the RDC's Hopewell East project. During construction, part of the project is to lay a large, I think it's a 42-inch storm sewer down Morton Street. When we got down to the point where we're making the connection to First Street, it was discovered that there is a buried Duke line, power line, that is intercepting the storm sewer. So we had to relocate that storm or that electric line through Duke. Duke's the only one that can do the work. They've given us an estimate for $43,780.30. Once that line then is relocated, we can continue installing the storm sewer in that area.
Ayton then responded to a question about whether or not Duke Energy's cost estimate is final.
Is that a pretty firm number? Duke has a habit of
the way the
adjusting.
Yeah, that's a good question, because the way the process works is Duke does an estimate for the work, and then it has to be paid up front before they'll start doing the work, so everything's built on an estimate. So this is the bill for $43,780 that would be built off that estimate. It'll be paid, they'll do the work. I've not gone through this process for a while with Duke, whether or not they actually kind of put the charges back together and come back with us with it was over, it was under. So we'll have to wait to figure out if it'll be the final cost. But at this point, it's the cost to get it working.
In an unlikely event that they're over, do we get a credit?
We will pursue it without a doubt. After they're done with the relocation, we'll contact them for a final billing. They'll most likely tell us it was this charge.
The Redevelopment Commission approved all 4 Hopewell contracts unanimously. The Richland Bean Blossom School Board met on July 15th. Superintendent Dr. Jerry Sanders discussed a new form of communication with Richland Bean Blossom school families during emergency situations.
I'm really excited about this agenda item because speaking of needs, whenever we have an emergency situation, it could be inclement weather, it could be any other type of emergency, and we need to get information out quickly. The way we've been doing it for the last several years is very cumbersome, and it takes time. We have used something called Blackboard, and that's what we do the all-call messages on. And so I will have to go on the Blackboard site, and there's just steps you have to go through, and then finally be able to record the message. Then after I do that, then I have to go to our student management system, Harmony, and send out an email to our families. And so if you can imagine how much time that takes, it just isn't efficient. Plus, we've never been able to use, we have never used text messages. And so we explored some different types of programs that we could use to make our communication much more efficient. And so we arrived at the company called Final Site, which actually purchased Blackboard. And this is really going to be, parents are going to love it, staff's going to love it, I'm going to love it, because we can send an email, a text message, voice message, send the message via mobile app and website all at the same time.
He also said it would be helpful for non-emergency situations, like alerting specific bus routes that are running late and for translating the announcements into different languages.
We're going to be able to be more specific in the population that we communicate with. For example, when we have buses that are running late, we'll have to send an email out to everybody, where it just might pertain to a smaller number of students that ride that specific bus. So we'll be able to pinpoint the messages we send out. And maybe one of the areas I'm most excited about is because we have a lot more students English that speak other languages other than English. And so this will translate that message into whatever language that family speaks in their home. And so I think that'll be really helpful for us to meet the needs of that population of students.
The motion to approve the contract with Final Site Communications program passed unanimously. Superintendent Sanders went on to speak about school supply giveaways.
I also wanted to point out school supply giveaways. I know that a neighboring school corporation has been publicizing that because of their referendum that they were able to give free school supplies to everybody. But I just wanted to assure our community, and I'll be sharing this in our letter to parents, but students that attend Edgewood schools, they don't have to worry about school supplies. We have a student assistance fund. First of all, we have a lot of school supplies that are already at the schools because of so many great donations in the past. But we have a student assistance fund that helps any family that may be challenged financially. The Ellisville Tri-Kappa organization provides school supplies every year. They're going to bring some school supplies to the high school August 1st or 2nd, and then when we have our back-to-school staff meeting, we'll have those school supplies out for the teachers to take back to their classrooms.
The next Richland Bean Blossom School Board meeting will take place on Monday, August 19th. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.
All I know about this thing is what it looks like and where I found it. In the spring or early summer of '83, my brother and niece and I were taking
to expel the waste because in architecture you have volume outside of the body in a very short time. That invite light. It brings in a great amount of
when you come
to a painting, it's on a flat surface, but you have all the same.
Thank you.